Howdy everyone, it's me once again, the one and only Killer Rodan. Here I am, I'm going to be talking about more spooky stuff, of course, because it's the month of October, because as promised, that's all I'm going to be doing all month. And I do mean all month. I know technically I probably would have done this anyway, because as far as I'm concerned, Halloween's year round. I like horror movies anyway. Spooky movies, creature features, you name it, I like all that. I mean, okay, technically, I know this is the last day of Halloween and whatnot, so I probably would have done this anyway, just to do something here, of course, and whatnot. But anyway, I just thought I'd just do one of these types of videos of lost cinema, where certain movies were supposed to be made, but for one reason or another, it just got in the way. Maybe it wasn't created, it wasn't produced because maybe creative differences, which of course happens quite often. More times than you realize. Maybe because of delays, or maybe because of that. Maybe too many cooks in the kitchen. Maybe the directors keep changing, or maybe the cast and crew keep changing. Bottom line, there's a number of different reasons that could just start to pretty much put the production on halt for like quite a while. Maybe what I'm saying that is that maybe even being placed in production hell or delimit purgatory kind of has to be a thing, of course, which happens obviously. And yeah, this happens way more often than you realize, folks. Oh, definitely. It's not that some projects can't be saved from dead living limbo because that has happened, but other times you may be stuck there permanently. And just because your movie was made into a film doesn't mean they can't put the plug, which also has happened before. Anyway, while technically speaking, the Toho company did release Terror of Mechagodzilla, and that was actually made, but I'm going to be referring to a much earlier version of the film that they wanted to do. And yeah, so I'm going to be talking about the early version of this film, of course. It was going to be released in the same year of the actual film in 1975. So even though these films were pretty much on a decline when it comes to their popularity, but this one is also going to be, I guess, it's a part of history in some ways because yeah, it was going to be directed by a woman. While she eventually did direct the the finished movie, but yeah, this one of those rare times in the Godzilla series that the director was a woman, and yeah, she was the screenwriter and director of Terror Megazilla, among with a few other films to her credit, of course. But yes, this was definitely yes, this would have been a historical first for the franchise, and you can say it technically was because she still directed the finished version of this film, but she was active from 1974 all the way through 2011. But anyway, of course, just like the finished film, it was going to take this sci-fi element, of course, because the idea here it was going to be doing the characters. I mean, we're going to be doing some kind of research on ways to control sea life, and the scientist character, Dr. Mafone, uncovers two dragon-like creatures called the Titans, pretty much revealing his findings to his colleagues, and the other scientists who has dismissed his over-the-top claims that after an outburst of Dr. Mafone leaves the institution, which, by the way, certain aspects of this story didn't make it into the film, by the way. Anyway, as I was saying, however, in the original version, you see this creature, this giant monster, Titanosaurus. Yes, there was actually going to be two of them. Two Titanosaurus creatures are going to be teaming up with Mechagodzilla. Yeah, so in this original version, two of these creatures will team up. So it's going to be three giant things against Godzilla, of course. So yeah, in the original version of the story. So yeah. However, the Doctor does continue his research with the help of his only daughter, named Kansera. Consumed by the rage of his mistreatment, Dr. Mafone pretty much becomes obsessed with his work, ultimately learns to control these two dinosaurs, and many years later, the Doctor character is confronted by a group of mysterious men asking for the aid of these two titans. They reveal themselves to be spacemen from the Black whole and explained that they wanted the two Titans to pretty much team up with the forces of the newly reconstructed Mechagodzilla 2. Uh, a thing to which the Doctor does agree with because he pretty much wants revenge on society. However, Dr. Mafone starts to become, yeah, let's say nervous and whatnot because of the robotic monster Mechagodzilla, just pretty much an updated version of the other Mechagodzilla that came out in the film that came out previously, and sends the two Titans to attack Tokyo ahead of schedule. The two Titans managed to merge into one much larger Titan, which has, of course, has a brief fight with Godzilla himself before retreating to the sea. So yes, of course, there's going to be also a second attack that's then prepared. This time with both fused titans in one body, as mentioned a moment ago. And yes, Mechagodzilla 2, the two monsters immediately start leveraging Tokyo, and of course, Godzilla himself once again would appear to stop them, at least an attempt to, of course. So yeah, during the skirmish, during the attack, I should say, the entire city of Tokyo is leveled, but in the end, Godzilla was just trying his best no matter what. But anyway, ultimately, there was going to be, of course, budget problems. I mean, yes, these films are usually cheaply made, yes, but these films got cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper as it goes. These films got really cheap as it goes, of course, obviously. And yes, this movie had the original screenplay that was done by that one woman I just showed a moment ago after winning Tokyo's story contest for the next installment in the Godzilla series, which was picked by some assistant producer and was submitted for approval in July 1st, in 1974, less than 4 months after the Proof Godzilla film, which was released that very year. The original concept, of course, was somewhat similar to the finished version of Terror Mechagodzilla with many changes, which, of course, like I said a moment ago, being because of the fact that budget problems of the nature. Yes, the most obvious alteration was the removal of the two Titanosaurus monsters, which would have eventually merged into some even bigger, more crazy version of the character. It was also, yes, and I do think it was a pretty good concept, of course. And yes, obviously, it had big admiration, I guess, big goals for the script, of course. And yes, it would have been pretty wide, obviously. There was that, of course. And yes, obviously, this would have been pretty cool if you ask me. Oh, yeah. And yes, of course, another notable change for this movie was done to the script is that was the final battle, which doesn't which was eventually moved to the side country, I guess, the countryside. But in the original version, that would have been reduced to Tokyo, the entire city, into rubble during the conflict, of course, between the monsters. So that's another original change right there, a big change, because as mentioned a moment ago, in the original film, it was going to take place in the final fight would take place in Tokyo. Why there is a fight, why there is a battle in the finished film in Tokyo, but it didn't play out exactly how it was in the original version, because at the end of the finished version of the film, the last climactic fight almost took place in the countryside, pretty much. Again, this has some of the budget problems because making big scale city models, yes, costs money. Yes, making these model sets does cost lots and lots and lots of money. So, in other words, it would have been way too expensive to have a climactic scene like that in the movie. As much as they really wanted to do it, it just wouldn't happen because it was end up being too costly. So, unfortunately, that was definitely win, of course. Anyway, after the director, screenwriter, after her first initial draft, it was submitted with the revived version was submitted on October of 1974 on the 14th, by the way, and then it went through to a different revision on December 4th of the same year. And then another revived version again in December 28th of the same year, before it made to the approved filmed version in the following year. So yeah, folks, there's that, folks. Yes, obviously these movies will be pretty quickly made, obviously, and yes, one thing people don't seem to realize that these movies, or any movie really, when it comes to Japan, is much more competitive in Japan. So you do have to make these movies pretty fast and whatnot, especially when it's kaiju movies. You can say that for any movie in Japan, regardless of genre, because that does happen. Yes, crank them out like crazy, so to speak. Terror of Mechagodzilla was released, theatrically speaking, in Japan on March 15th of 1975 to mostly positive reviews. It was also released in the UK in 1976 under the title Monsters from an Unknown Planet. It was also released on a limited time release in the United States in 1978 by Bob Kane Enterprise under the title of Godzilla, The Terror of Godzilla, really. And yes, of course, the Japanese version of this film is vastly different than any of the American versions, by the way, just throwing it out there. However, it didn't really help matters that this film, Terror of Mechagodzilla, yes, even the Japanese version, remained the least financially successful entry of the entire series to this very day. So, in other words, this film bombed in the box office and it became the least financial film of all of them. I mean, granted, yes, of course, there were still some people who are fans of this, well, people who actually thoroughly enjoy this film, really. But yes, of course, this was definitely going to be a thing, obviously. So yeah, there were many changes that were done, as mentioned a moment ago, and obviously this was definitely going to be a thing. It would have been really rather interesting concept, although that would have been underexplained. Like, how does this happen really? How did this happen? How are these? Wouldn't that mean that there are maybe three of them? Is there like an entire family? Is there like an entire network of friends? Would it be more than two? Why is it just two? Like, why two? It's not three, maybe four or five. Why is it limit them to two? I don't know. Stuff like this was never explained really. I mean, granted, this was never explained in the. I mean, it was explained to an extent in the finished version, of course. And then in the Japanese version, yes, of course, I'm talking about the Japanese version. In the Japanese version, human beings were kidnapped and I guess tortured to some extent. Yeah, it got pretty dark in some ways, and that's definitely is a thing, folks. A lot of people would say is that is darker than some of the entries in the series. When we come to the Sora era, of course, it got pretty dark. But point being is that yes, the actual aliens actually kidnapped, which yes, kidnapping is pretty dark when you think about it. That too. But and there was even one bit where in the Japanese version where there was the head alien that was actually whipping, actually officially assaulting one of the follower aliens, which again is pretty dark. It's pretty grim in its own way. Anyway, but yes, the aliens actually kidnapped some humans and just forced them to be this guinea pigs because they were forced test subject. And yeah, that again is pretty damn dark. But again, that while that is in the Japanese finished version, of course, in the original version of the film, but yeah, that was in the Japanese version of the film, of course. I'm not too sure on how this would have really been explored in the original version, but either way, it was not explained really. I thought that was a pretty good idea in the finished version of the film that was actually actually released. But even in the finished version of the film, it was never explained who are these characters. It was just random characters, random human characters that was freed later on in the film. So of course it was that. I mean, yes, we get secret agents in this movie. There were secret agents in this film. So I'm not sure how much this would have been explored upon in the original draft. I'm not quite too sure. Anyway, so there was that, of course. The director, Ishiro Honda, stated that, yeah, he was not involved in this project, yeah, not being able to work with the story's writer and other films, enjoying a woman's perspective, especially fresh for the genre. So yes, having a female director was intentional, of course, because of the fact that like Ishwara said, he wanted to have a fresh perspective on the genre. So there you go, of course. There was that. And yes, I guess it is what it is, I suppose. It would have been nice to see how this would have turned out. Of course, it would have been nice how this would have turned out if it actually went this way. I'm not sure if it would have saved the film, really, because after this film was released, the Gonzalez series went into a hiatus for about 9 years. So in other words, it just came out like it had a 9 year series. I mean, it had a 9 year hiatus, really. So I'm not sure if this would have saved the series or not, because if the series went into a long, long hiatus right after this, unfortunately, but what can you do? It still would have seemed interesting nonetheless if this was actually done. It's just unfortunate that this becomes a commonplace when you think about it. I mean, yes, I do think that there's some good ideas here. There's some pretty interesting ideas for this kind of a thing. I think this would have worked, of course, and in a lot of ways, I guess it could have. I do kind of wish that Toho or some other directors could have returned to this concept and just maybe use certain elements, of course. Because some of these elements could have been used for a different movie and just retweak it, because it's going to be taken in a different continuity. Just retweak some of the elements. Anyway, that'll be it for now, folks. So, of course, as always, thanks for watching and see ya. And happy Halloween, everybody. Oh, definitely. Oh, yeah.